Okay, hello, and thank you for coming today. We're in the round here. I'm Trey Burns, and this is my exhibition, Prairie Piece. What follows now is what I would kind of consider a performance piece, and is a supplemental to the essay that has the same title as the show. I'm not going to be reading my own text. I'm actually inviting Tino Ward, Adrienne, Lichliter-Hines, and Tamara Johnson and Daryl Meador to help me with that task. That being said, we're going to start up the ramp here with Robert Smithson and down here at the microphone with Tino Ward.
Anyone who embeds themselves in Dallas's cultural sphere seems to naturally become aware of Robert Smithson's association with the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. He worked as a self-described artist consultant with the firm Tippett, Abbott, McCarthy, Stratton, contributing to designs for what was to be the largest airport in the world. Remarkably, this dalliance, which unfolded from 1966 to 1967, weaves Dallas into the tapestry of land art's beginnings. As Smithson reviewed plans and aerial views of the airport site, he suddenly envisioned the potential for monumental outdoor sculpture. Smithson saw his sculptural ideas for the airport as ideally viewed from above, calling them first aerial art, as you can see on some of these drawings. To Smithson, the burgeoning spaces of mass air travel being woven into the post-war globalizing world was an untouched canvas, a terra nullis, or terra incognita, and an interesting place generally for artists to think about. In this exhibition, the animations at the top of the ramp stir to life the breadth of Robert Smithson's grand visions. They ask you to imagine a world where the firm Tippett, Abbott, McCarthy, Stratton won their bid, and the sprawling expanse of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport became a sculptural mecca unlike any other, one that would blur the boundaries between the earthly and the mechanical, the organic and the constructed, and infrastructure and art. I'd like to point out the mounds in this drawing. These organic forms, vaguely resembling security envelope patterns, are proposals for massive forms, each made of earth, spread across acres and acres of airport property. In this context, it feels instinctive to draw parallels between Smithson's concepts and ancient earthworks, such as the geoglyphs of the Cerne Abbas giant in Dorset. So much of land art is a penis in the landscape. The spirals of the Nazca lines in Peru. Or closer to home, like the Mississippian mounds at Spiro Mounds in eastern Oklahoma, and Cahokia Mounds in Collinsville, Illinois, near St. Louis. I would also like to draw connections to the grand scale of the Dallas floodway, with its levees engineered to direct and manage the flow of the Trinity River. These substantial earthworks began in 1932, and significant upgrades were received in 1960, which raised these protective barriers to 30 feet. Designed to mitigate the river's overflow during torrential rains, this structure also naturally serves as a collection point for runoff from the expansive concrete urban landscape surrounding it. All our debris, the bits and bits of stuff, boogers, Band-Aids, wrappers, bottles, lost credit cards, and plastic bags. Another video in the exhibition, seen here on the floor, follows local artist and friend Tino Ward. Hey, that's me. as he collects material between the levees. His almost archaeological act of collecting posits a reflection on the longevity of these forms. I imagine these levees outliving their inception and purpose, prompting one to muse on their legacy through the lens of future civilizations, a testament to how the mundane can turn to monumental in the spiral of time.
One of my favorite aspects of Smithson's proposal of the DFW airport was his idea for a gallery in the airport that would feature a multimedia exhibition of didactics, photography, and films about the outdoor earthworks he planned. It would have also featured television feeds showcasing the live footage of those outdoor projects, which would have been intermixed with live footage of airplanes taking off and landing. This would have provided visitors with a private view of the airport's living pulse and allowed them to participate in these cameras' surveillance apparatus. Smithson's museum concept, with its multimedia displays, is not unlike the interior of George W. Bush Library. In the Bush Library exhibition space, we find letters, photographs, marginalia, replicas, models, and touchscreen displays that illustrate key battles and strategies of the vast and costly wars that are Mr. Bush's legacy. Here we see visitors viewing touchscreen displays about battles in Afghanistan and Iraq. I believe this brand of sci-fi banality, touchscreen war didactics, might have delighted Smithson's darker tendencies. Outside this building, which is full of dystopian displays, we find the simulated prairie of the native Texas park. Beyond that, the ecoregion of the nearly extinct Blackland Prairie holds the Dallas Project in its container. Let's focus on the native Texas park and George W. Bush Library. This 15-acre prairie garden can be described in many ways, but I'd like to think of it in terms of its semiotics for a moment, so as to unpack it. I'm not a semiotician, me neither. In fact, this kind of game gives me a headache, but it's useful for mapping the complex interplay at work here. In this George W. Bush Library scenario, the Texas Blackland Prairie is represented, the signified. The native Texas park, embodying native prairie elements, the signifier, signals the essence of the Texas Blackland Prairie. Moreover, it symbolizes the library's rootedness in Texan identity and landscape. The sign mirrors George W. Bush's ties to the state. So incorporating native flora creates a conscious link to Texan heritage, akin to wearing a belt buckle or cowboy boots at a state dinner to affirm one's Texan identity. This example illustrates the prairie as performance. Applying Roland Barthes' second-order signification to the native Texas park of the George W. Bush Library reveals a deeper mythological layer to its inclusion of the Texas Blackland Prairie. On the surface, the park appears as a homage to the nearly extinct natural landscape, symbolizing efforts to preserve or remember what was once ubiquitous. The first-order signification, where the physical manifestation of the park and its prairie elements signify both conservation, read responsible governance, and connection to the local, read we the people. To expand this examination through the lens of Barthes' mythological framework, the park's representation of the prairie becomes a signifier for a broader ideological charged extraction and extinction narrative. The narrative underscores the aggressive exploitation of cheap nature, a concept Raj Patel and Jason W. Moore have articulated, highlighting how natural landscapes and resources are commodified and used for economic gain with little reward for environmental or social costs. In this second-order signification, the prairie not only is just a prairie, but a mythologized symbol of these extractive and exploitative practices. It is a refracting narrative where a preservation of the prairie within the park reveals the specter of relentless exploitation. It also conjures George W. Bush's foreign policy, rooted in the same colonial and neo-colonial strategies of claiming lands and procuring their resources for extraction. This mythologization turns the park into a more complex sign on one level, commemorates the vanishing landscape, while on the other, inadvertently celebrates the very ideological tendencies responsible for its near extinction.
Here's my 9/11 story. I was in high school when it occurred. This fact used to make me sound young, but now it makes me sound old. I lived in Tequila, Georgia, where the biggest attraction was the Dairy Queen. Our principal, whose name was Donald Nutt, on learning of the first attack in the morning, decided the best response was to turn off the TVs and the internet, leaving us in a state of fear. This approach was, of course, idiotic, because what happened was a rumor churn about more significant attacks across the country, even many believing that planes were crashing everywhere. In the years that followed, several of my classmates, both men and women, enlisted in the military to fight the war on terror. One particular figure from my high school remains vivid in my memory. His name was Ryan Esposito. Quick portrait of Ryan. He was always tan, like a golden Waffle House hash brown, even in the winter, earning the nickname Tan Guy from my friend Jason. He sported a George Clooney Caesar cut with hair gel, wore Abercrombie & Fitch clothes, and adorned himself with puka shell necklaces. He wore Cool Water cologne. Esposito drove a Jeep with a lift kit from which he hung his visor and sunglasses on the mirror. He was a poster child for that SoCal look, which was very important in the suburbs of Georgia in the early 2000s. I found him impossibly cool back then, but mostly because he could dance. I was fascinated by anyone who could dance, particularly those who had mastered the Atlanta-style tick battle, popular among the football players at my school. I can't do it either. I could never do this dance. My body was too fluid and a bit too jazzy. I was in the marching band. Ryan Esposito eventually enlisted. He served in the Marines and did multiple tours in Afghanistan. We kept in touch via social media, and once, when he was home, he paid me $100 to chauffeur him and his girlfriend around on a date. I remember that trip home because he was jumpy. There was a change in his eyes. He drank a lot of beer in the back of his Jeep, and not in a fun way, while I drove them around. Ryan would get super nervous when we got to traffic lights, darting his head around back and forth. His fear was palpable, but he played it off as fatigue from the long flight home. Then we lost touch. I heard later that Ryan had some sort of freak out, friend of a friend's words, and they shipped him to a facility in California. We didn't really say PTSD at this moment, or maybe we did, it just wasn't in my lexicon. And years later, I saw him back on social media. He was supporting a test tattoo that said, "Strength and Solitude." He looked gaunt, haunted, and pretty lost. Thanks, Bush. Ryan Esposito's signature move in his dance battles in high school was the techno ball. While battling, he would conjure an imaginary ball, manipulating it with finesse, swallowing it, batting it away like a baseball, among other actions. Maybe you've seen this move in the wild before. In this dance-style battle, the ball represents more than a visual trick. It embodies an imagined space for the performer's energy and spirit. The animus that fuels the dance battle resides and flourishes in the ball. Ideally, this ball gets passed back and forth between the battlers, and its intensity grows.
I want us to see this invisible and imaginary ball as a container where we can put anything, imaginary boundaries for our own special purposes. Here we can put ideas of North Texas, Dallas, prairies, or presidencies, or even bigger concepts such as nature. This is a nature that is separated from the world and yourself. This bifurcation, a false duality, haunts our collective consciousness. It's easy to see how this has been used to categorize our world as man versus nature, or us and them. This didactic way of thinking, a product of the Enlightenment, has birthed terms like Anthropocene, demarcating our era's imprint on the earth. The word Anthropocene has an interesting effect of making people's eyes glaze over in an art context, but it also has an interesting history. The term comes from atmosphere chemist Paul Crutzen. Paul Crutzen started his career as a scientist in the Cold War 80s, studying the possible impacts of nuclear winter brought on by military interventions. Later, in the 90s, he began to believe that a man-created nuclear winter might be a good way to tackle climate change. This is a terrifying reality for those inside this imaginary ball. In his book, Capitalism in the Web of Life, Jason W. Moore points out that, quote, nature can neither be saved nor destroyed, only transformed, unquote. He observes nature as the matrix in which capitalism operates, but quickly observes that nature also operates in the capitalism matrix. As we wade deeper into the 21st century, this complicated entanglement is where we live. Moore offers another term for the ways in which humans create the conditions for life, the oikeos. This word means roughly belonging to the house. This brings me back to the prairie as it is presented in this exhibition. For me, the Metroplex as a hollowed-out prairie erased by the big C's, cotton, cattle, and condos, is still the same prairie. Not destroyed, only transformed. In a previous essay about finding landscapes in North Texas, I observed, quote, if old prairie was grass, forb, sedge, forb, legume, grass, is the new prairie neighborhood, strip mall, office building, apartment building, interchange, and parking lot, unquote. The void left by the vanished prairie can be used to help define Dallas, its elusive identity, and its unreadable landscapes. It is shaped by absence and mimics an unruly tangle. That tall grass prairie, whose surface masks a vast invisible system of connective roots, an entanglement of species, the narrative symphony of organisms with subtle functions, stories, and histories. Is this not what a city is? We live amidst ruins, but are also still beholden to the schematic of a ghost ecology. A trumpet vine grows to the top of a cell tower and broadcasts its logic. This term, oikeos, can be used to describe and classify the Dallas Floodway's novel Ecologies, the expensive fascia mules of the George W. Bush Library, and the other performative gardens which take the form of development. It also includes the exploitation and degradation of the rest of the city. This is the actuality of the prairie. As Kubler observes, quote, actuality is when the lighthouse is dark between flashes, unquote. To grasp the essence of the prairie today means cataloging and understanding these manifestations, for therein lies, perhaps too simplistically stated, our pathway to truth, to rootedness, and to survival. I'd like to end with this. As Moore observes, quote, the oikeos informs a perspective on historical change in the web of life as simultaneously enfolding and unfolding, unquote. The matrix of nature and capitalism entwined. It is a condition of flows and the flow of flows. Weather systems and supply chains which constantly pass through and over our bodies and in which we are agents. It is a hypercube, like Saul Lewitt's proposal for Smithson's airport. The hypercube represents a higher dimension of being in construction. The prairie is the ball, and the ball is over us and in us simultaneously. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.